for research. Like the visionary that he is, reassured us, sir, in couple of times during last 2 months during the COVID time. The third time he is addressing all of us. We're very fortunate and in fact the very honor to have the Professor Reshwarma sir as a keynote speaker.
First of all, I thank the Vice Chancellor, Registrar and all the authorities of Rajiv Gandhi University for having given us the opportunity to host this international seminar on opportunities and challenges in medical research. I consider it is a very, very significant topic. Through the new education policy, it has given a lot of importance to greater emphasis to research, particularly the interdisciplinary research. A separate body is constituted for funding for research and even introduction of research at different levels. The modification in the teaching methodology in the primary and secondary education level, so that the youngsters will develop creativity and curiosity in the subject. Whenever we speak of research or innovation, particularly with reference to a very long period when the research was at the peak, long back, maybe sometimes nearing to prehistoric period. We always claim pride, feel proud of the contributions made by the great eminent researchers of those period. No doubt, it is a matter of great pride for us. Always, we should be proud of our history, should be proud of our past. When India was at the peak of the knowledge in various fields, maybe medicine or maybe astronomy or maybe mathematics. You name any subject, there's somebody who has contributed to a great extent in these subjects. And when such a vast knowledge was available in the country, then during that period, the Aboriginals of America were wandering in the forests as forest dwellers. Now, that is the level of development India had seen during those early periods, maybe about 3 or 400 BC, and even earlier to that. We always speak very high of our universities of those days, Takshila, which is about 800 BC old. We now speak of Study in India program, but that Study in India program was there then, 800 BC. Takshila attracted people from different nations. It was a great center of learning, and similarly, the Nalanda, which is about 5th century AD university, attracted hundreds of people, thousands of people from different parts of the world. That's the kind of importance India had given for education and innovation. And it's really amazing that as back as 8000 BC, in the excavations of Indus Valley, which is now in Pakistan, in a place called as Meghar, which is a Neolithic site. There, they could find out the practice of drilling of tooth in a living person. It's appeared in Nature magazine of 2006. So that's the kind of research it was done. And of course, all of you are very much familiar with Charaka and Shushruta, 400 BC and around that. These were the contributions of eminent saints, rishis, in the field of science. And even if you come to a later period, even during 10th century, 12th century, we can name people like Aryabhatta and Bhaskara, who contributed to astronomy and things like that. So when we had a great history like this in research, technology, innovation, creativity, then why suddenly India lagged behind in the field of research? If you come to the later part of the medieval period, maybe 12th century, 13th century, so during that period, slowly the research in India declined and research in Europe started improving. It started taking a leap over India. Well, there may be different reasons for that. One of the reasons is that during those period, maybe there were a lot of invasions, and because of these invasions, the research came down, and also the learning materials of those days were totally lost during the invasion. They were burnt and they were lost. A lot of materials were lost, and these invasions were later followed by the uh, colonial rule for about more than 200 years. There was colonial rule. And during colonial rule also, there was not much emphasis, importance given to education. Even now, when we talk of education system in India, we without fail make a mention of Macaulay's education system. So in that there's a least importance given to research or innovation. Rather, it was a rote learning for a particular profession, for taking a particular profession that's being continued now. So these are the reasons, some of the reasons, there may be many. And also, there were lots of political instability during that period. So people were bothered about their survival, and the research started taking a backstage. These are some of the reasons for lagging behind in research during the later part of medieval period up to, we can say, uh, getting independence or up to now. So when I say that, it's not that no research has happened then, but researches have happened, and there are people who can be quoted, there are people who can be named, there are people who can be referred, but not to the extent that has happened in Europe or in other countries. But one sad part is, even after getting independence, the area of research has not developed significantly. In India, the educational institutions remained as teaching institutions. No much importance was given to research. It's really surprising that even now, out of the eligible candidates, eligible students, only 0.5% of these students join PhD in India for a PhD program in India. So 99.5% students, though they are eligible, though there is opportunity, they don't take up research. So that indicates that that kind of attitude, that kind of approach, that inquisitiveness is lacking with Indians or Indian students. Now, what can be done for this, or what are certain reasons, problems, difficulties we have with the present system? One is, as I understand, having been worked in the field of education, I feel that lack of experimentation, lack of opportunity for experimentation is one of the reasons why students are not creative. Practical is different from experimentation. We have practicals. The practicals are again like a guided tour. They are given definite route through which they do it and observe the things, and it's not independent learning. Experimentation is something which is done independently, and they innovate something, they come up with certain new ideas and concept. Only when there is experimentation, the mind can become creative. We often quote Isaac Newton, his famous story of apple. Sitting under the apple tree, apple falls on its head, and he invents the law of gravity. it is not that all of a sudden he realizes uh, 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 the law of gravity or he discovers the law of gravity. It's not a sudden enlightenment he gets under the tree. So he was working to, give reason for the planets moving around, revolving around the sun or the moon orbiting around the earth. So he was making a constant study on these areas. It was always in his mind. And when apple fell on his head, that was the reason. He suddenly found out the reason for the movement of these planets or orbiting of these planets around the sun or the moon around the earth. Had he not had the basic, concept in his mind, if he was not serious about these aspects, he would not have been able to uh, come across or find out the law of gravity. So that's what the new finding doesn't happen all of a sudden, but people have to keep thinking about it, thinking about some concept, and suddenly they will get the answer for that. And that's the kind of activity students should be doing, but there is very least opportunity uh, to do that in our educational system. And our educational system is not at all in line with the international benchmark. We still follow the rote learning practices, what we practiced as students, or what our teachers practice as students. Our students also are practicing the same method. There has not been any upgradation with regard to, or much upgradation, I would say any upgradation, much upgradation with regard to the quality or the content of delivery or the pattern of delivery, quality of the syllabus or the pattern of delivery. And then children also are not much curious because a lot of emphasis is given to ranks and distinctions. Students get a general feel that getting distinction is important to get recognition. Ultimately, everybody craves for recognition. They feel that getting ranks is important for distinction or recognition in the society or getting a place, and these other activities will not be of much benefit to them. So that's why there's a beautiful statistics in India. 216 researchers are there per million population. 216 researchers per million population, whereas in China the number is 1,200 researchers per million population, whereas in France and United States it is 4,300 researchers per million population. See the difference, 2016 in India and 4,300 per million in France and United States. So that's the state of affairs with regard to research in India. And the other thing is the uh, interdisciplinary aspects or the newer research opportunities available to the students are not included in the curriculum. For example, the molecular biology, the advanced molecular biology or NMR spectroscopy. These are the things which are NMR spectroscopy is very much used in research in biological sciences, but that aspect is not taught in the undergraduate level. As I understand, if it's there, I may be excused. Generally, these aspects or even students don't get introduction to this. That's why if you look at the kind of research in any area for that matter, the kind of research we come across, we see is of very basic research, very general research, and very few students, maybe after graduation, if they get into some of the premier institutions, they will land up in doing advanced level of research. Otherwise, most of the researchers which happen in the universities and institutions are basic research, because in our curriculum there is no adequate information or input about the present level of research that's happening elsewhere, and also introduction about these subjects. In general education, there's a clear-cut distinction between these subjects, demarcation between the subjects, a boundary between the subjects. A biology student cannot take physics, but NMR is a combination of physics and biology. The DNA was discovered by Watson and Crick. Watson was a biologist, and Crick was a chemist. It is interdisciplinary. Most of the things happen at the interdisciplinary level, and such exposures are lacking in our education system. And then the funding, of course, no big research can happen without funding. Institutions will not be able to spend to a great extent. Funding is another aspect. Say it is 2.11% of GDP. In France, it is 2.25% of GDP. United States is 2.74% of GDP. When we take into consideration the population of India, if you divide it, divide 0.62 with the aspirants, as people aspire for grant, what grant they get is very, very minimal or very, very small. So this big research is not possible. Many of the institutions or researchers will not be able to do big research. That's why out of the total R&D output, United States and China contribute to about 50% of R&D output, whereas India's contribution to the global R&D output is only 2.7%. So it's really a matter of concern, and in whatever possible, in whatever way possible, we need to try to strengthen this, improve the research activities and research output from our institution. And one more thing is the segregation, postgraduate level or after you do post-graduation. It's not so. Now a lot of emphasis is being given to undergraduate research. In one of the recent science congresses, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi also made a mention. He has requested the people to find out ways and means of introducing research at the undergraduate level in central and state universities. So these are some of the reasons why we are lagging behind, but still there is opportunity if it is taken up seriously, if the small projects, small activities, small opportunities for experimenting is given to the students at the undergraduate level. Certainly more students may be interested, more students may develop curiosity and interest in research, and in coming days there can be a better output with regard to research. Now undergraduate research is not something new. It may be new to us, but a lot of countries, many countries have introduced undergraduate research, and they are now reaping the benefit of it. Even at the school level, they have introduced research projects, research programs, so that when they come to higher education, they will be tuned for taking up a bigger level of research. We often in our vision statement make a mention that our vision, one of the visions is to be a global leader. That word global is often used in our vision and mission statements. And one thing we should remember, we cannot be world class without good research output. Any institution cannot be a world class institution without research output. That's why the program of Government of India, the Institution of Excellence program, the research performance as projected in NIRF, National Institution Ranking Framework, is considered as one of the major criteria. So quantity of research, number of publications and number of projects, number of research activities, and the quality of research, both are equally important. And research for the advancement of science, particularly in case of Ayurveda. There's a lot of opportunity for advanced level of research so that the entire subject, the method of treatment, the Indian system of medicine can attract global attention if higher level of research is undertaken. And before I conclude, I want to quote one of the statements that's made by the president of Harvard University as back as 1863. He said, if the genius of our college is such that they must be confined to diffusion of knowledge and not allowed to contribute to its increase, then it is time we found a new institution whose purpose shall be to further sound learning. So, very clearly, he said, if the purpose of the institution is only diffusion of knowledge, dissemination of knowledge, and not creation of knowledge, not production of new knowledge, he said, it is time we close down the university and start a new university, new institution, whose purpose shall be to further sound learning. So that I conclude. I thank the organizers for giving the opportunity and I wish this program all the best. Thank you one and all.
Thank you very much, sir. You rightly spoke about the education systems in ancient India and Indian knowledge bases and the necessity of reviving them by adopting the particular methods of research. And you also spoke about the reasons for declining in research in modern India. And also you highlighted the need of reforms in the education system to bring up the quality research works and also to making a modification in the curriculum, which is more of research oriented and considering the good output in terms of research. Thank you very much. We thank you from the perspective of our organizing committee and also the principal, sir, the STM College of Ayurveda and Hassan, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, sir. Thank you, sir. K. Kumar. Dr. Nandini K. Kumar graduated from Trivandrum Medical College and did post-graduation there for Diploma in Clinical Pathology and Masters in Bioethics from the University of Toronto, Canada as a Fogarty Fellow. She was involved in medical research in Gastroenterology Department at Trivandrum and Madras Medical College, Chennai. She retired as a Deputy Director General, Senior Grade from the Indian Council of Medical Research, New Delhi, where she was the Program Officer for Bioethics, Traditional Medicine Research, and also for Pharmacology and Summer Studentship for medical undergraduates. She was closely involved with the activities related to the drug development in traditional systems of medicine and similar programs in the country concerning herbal and herbomineral formulations. She has been deeply involved in formulation of different national ethical guidelines, including research on ASU, formulations, stem cell, mental health, data set protection and golden triangle partnership of scheme of Ayush. She had been closely involved in finalization of ICMR ethical guidelines of 2000, 2006 and that of 2017. She was closely involved in preparation of the bill on ethical guidelines involving human participants from 2002 onwards. She is a national and international surveyor for SIDCER, that is Strategic Initiative for Development of Capacity in Ethical Review, WHO initiated International Agency for Recognition of Ethical Committees. She is a pioneer in the area of bioethical education in India, having started the first online one-year diploma program in bioethics under ICMR IGNO Joint Initiative through NIH funding. Her expertise now is in the area of bioethics and traditional medicine research. She is a consultant, reviewer, and has publications in this area. She is actively involved in government and pharma industry initiatives in promoting awareness about protection of human participants and recent Indian regulations related to the clinical trials. She was the member of international panel of President Obama's Commission for the study of ethical issues besides other important national and international bodies. She was Dr. T.M.A. Pai Endowment Chair for Bioethics at Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Karnataka, and is presently adjunct faculty at Clinical Development Services Agency and visiting faculty at PSG Institute of Medical Sciences and Research, Coimbatore and Anapoya University. At present, she is a consultant for bioethics and traditional medicine research and Vice President of Forum for Ethics Review Committees in India, a national chapter of the Forum of Ethics Reviews Committees in Asia Pacific region in 2019. She was awarded Outstanding International Ethics Committee Surveyor by FERCAP. Presently, she is the chairperson of DSMB for COVID-19 research in Ayush formulations and member of Interdisciplinary Committee for Ministry of Ayush and Niti Aayog. This is her very brief introduction. So it's my privilege and honor to welcome the today's expert speaker, Dr. Nandini S. Kumar. The madam is going to speak on the topic, the updates in bioethical updates in COVID-19 scenario. Over to you, madam.
Namaskar to everyone. My obeisance to Lord Manjunatheshwara. And also I wish to acknowledge all the speakers who had spoken on the previous days, which I had been actually listening very keenly. In fact, I must say that my association with Karnataka was, in bioethics, it has been a long story. And also I had my association earlier with the SDM college in Ujire as a part of a team sent by the Central Council for Research in Yoga and Naturopathy. 10 years later, when I went there, I could see that I had to actually chair one of the sessions where papers were being presented by undergraduate students. I think possibly postgraduates, anyway, students. And I could see a good quality of presentation, which actually today I can say it without any doubt that some of the DNB students are not able to, or PG students in the modern medicine are not able to present it in that crisp manner. So I could see that there was actually talent here, quality here. And also, of course, I saw the surrounding environment also, which had improved quite a lot with the patronage of Padma Vibhushan, paid a lot of attention on ethics. And with St. John's Medical College, which actually is a pioneering institution in India, having taught bioethics for many years. Unfortunately, it has not been disseminated to the extent it could have been done. But I must say that my programs somehow rotated around Bangalore. I had 1 month program, 5 weeks program there, and important people who were associated with me was Dr. G.V. Satyavati, who was a DGICMR. She was in Bangalore, and the one who had chaired the Central Ethics Committee on Human Research for ICMR, which actually wrote the first guidelines, revised guidelines in 2000, was Honorable Justice M.N. Venkat Challaya. He was in Bangalore. And in St. John's, I had a colleague who had done the bioethics course in Toronto with me. He was in St. John's. So all these associations actually brought me to Bangalore many times. And it also brought me to institutions, teaching yoga, naturopathy, and also I had visited the SDM institution for the Medical College for Modern Medicine, as well as the hospital for yoga and naturopathy. And I had a very fleeting exposure to the Ayurveda college. So with that, I wish to thank the speaker for introducing me, and also the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk to all of you who seem to be very, very eager to learn newer things. And I can see the spark there. So it's my pleasure to present bioethics issues to this group. Let me just... So it will be actually on ethical issues related to COVID-19 pandemic. I'll be actually touching on, sorry, touching on codes of medical ethics in a fleeting manner, disasters and emergencies, which is actually the topic today. Everybody is talking around COVID, ethical issues in practice, ethical issues in research, and directives for ethics committees. So, if you look at the native cultures of Europe, you'll find that there was a lot of influence of environment. The Panchabhutas that we talk of in Ayurveda, or the other four natural forces that are actually spoken in context of the earlier times, Greek philosophy, as well as the Unani medicine, only goes to show that people believed in the influence of environment. Also, the influence of the planets. So it was called cosmophysiology, how it affects us. You know, we talk a lot about astrology rather than astronomy. Astronomy appears to be a finer science, which very few people take, but astrology seems to be a wider one, which is being distorted now and then by many people. But if you look at the pure science, they are interconnected and they affect our body. So that's why, you know, we say Aham Brahmasmi, that we are part of the cosmos, and it has the cosmophysiology is only the effect of cosmos. You know, we say such and such person is suffering from such and such thing because his one star is in one griha and another star in another griha and things like that and all that. So I'm not going into detail about that, but it's a very much part and parcel of the Indian living. So one must also remember that these the effects of the magnetic rays generated by the position of the stars do have an effect on the body, and that's how we behave. And we also actually from that time onwards to this day, we also believe a lot in the black magic and the influence of spirits. So under these mixed environment, there were these people, a literate society dating back to the historic origins, and who actually wrote certain codes. And these were people in authority. They described the behavior that was desirable and prescribed the behavior that was undesirable. So the do's and don'ts were already laid by them, and they had given specified roles to all agents and preservation of member identification. Under this background, Indian philosophy, if we take, it's quite complicated. I'm not going to go into details about that. Neither am I a pundit in Indian philosophy, but it will be enough to actually bring to mind that there are two divisions: sadhana dharma, vishesha dharma. Sadhana dharma we can translate into English as general principles, and vishesha dharma as the specific principles. This actually will echo in the present day guidelines of ICMR. So when we say sadhana dharma, it is universal in nature, and it is actually valid for all occasions, and they are all you know, the adjectives that we can use, the good adjectives about being honest, compassionate, respect, and things like that. When it comes to vishesha dharma, it is very specific, and we all know that in earlier times how the society was divided into different castes, and depending on the type of work they were doing. So there were obligations based on the cultural context, institution affiliation, the family background, the social status, the gender, and the stage in life. There were professional obligations in relation to these factors, and it was further divided into Swadharma and Paradharma. Swadharma for what you would do unto yourself, and Paradharma what you would do to others in the circumstances that I have described already. So, what is morality versus wisdom? So, morality always keep your promises. It states that. Whereas wisdom, when you consider wisdom, it never makes promises, because You only know the present moment and don't know how things will turn out in future. If you were to actually reflect this, or extrapolate this into Western principles, I would take morality as the deontological or the Kantian philosophy, where every action has to be right, depending on that particular moment. So, if you feel that you have to make a promise, you will think of that in all good sense, you will make that promise. But as you see in wisdom, it cautions you. It says that don't make promises because you never know what will happen in the future. So it bears its result in consequences. And this is in Western philosophy, you may call it a consequentialist type. That is, on the right side, it will be doing greatest good for the greatest number. So that is utilitarianism. So you have the two schools, not only in the Western philosophy, but also in the Indian philosophy laid down centuries ago. Morality seems to bind you, but wisdom seems to free you. And you can take examples of this as Bhishma personifying morality and Lord Krishna personifying wisdom. Keeping this in mind, we had Professor Yashovama talking about, what was laid down centuries ago. So what I have highlighted here about the centuries is about the written document. Before this, of course, we know that there was oral tradition, and the written documents, the earliest that were discovered was in Siddha, 30th century BC, and then we will not have debate on which century Charaka Samhita was there, 10th century to 2nd century AD, because different books give different period of time. So it is suffice to understand that these are created centuries ago, the Ayurveda Samhitas, besides certain other, texts which have come out and which also propound what a good physician should do. 4th century BC actually became famous because of Hippocrates. And Hippocrates actually, his tenets gave rise to the origins of modern medicine as well as Unani medicine. Unani medicine took a devious route. It became almost like Siddha and Ayurveda dealing with personalized medicine, but modern medicine became a reductionist medicine. But the underlying universal principle was do no harm. Primum non nocere. Now, this is very important because much later in the Western uh, philosophy, this principle also came by. We'll come to that little later. So, whether you take Ayurveda, Siddha, or Unani, it is centuries of research which had happened. And it was highlighted in all these texts to some extent, saying the same common language of information being acquired for benefit of patients. And that is nothing but research. And that's how these centuries of research led to fine tuning of the practical guidelines in these traditional systems. Coming to more modern times, ICMA brought out the 4 guidelines, 1980 to be first, and traditional medicine was covered in that. It was only 8 pages. But in that, the traditional medicine, it was clearly laid down that ethics committee approval has to be taken as early as 1980. Then the revised guideline in 2000 came by. 2006 was a further second revision, and actually 2000 took care of some parts of traditional medicine research in consultation with the Central Councils of Research under Department of ISM at that time, and 2006 Department of Ayush consultation was done, and a lot of cue was taken from the WHO publications also, which you heard Dr. talking about it. So 2017, the traditional medicine part actually got reduced, It mainly concentrated on the human side and also highlighted 2 points that if you are to do Ayurveda or Indian system research, the modern medicine researchers, they had to collaborate with the practitioner or researcher of that particular system because they are not well versed with that science. Whereas if you take the Indian systems of medicine, they know much more about modern medicine subjects rather than the modern medicine people knowing uh, anything or little bit of the Indian systems of medicine. So coming to the 2017 guideline, there are 12 sections. The green ones that you see is a new addition to the guidelines. And the brown ones that you see were already there, but they got expanded to such an extent that they had become a separate section by themselves. Now, why I'm highlighting this is mainly to make all of you understand that these guidelines are not meant only for modern medicine people. It is meant for all researchers in all streams of science. So one should not think that, oh, that is, these guidelines pertain to only these modern medicine people. Let us make another guideline for ourselves. It doesn't differ. In fact, I had been telling my trainees who are from the Indian systems of medicine to actually write about whatever the ethical principles have been described in their classical texts. And this was actually an exercise given in 2007, 2008. And I have seen only one publication, not publication, actually a write-up coming as recently as 3 or 4 months back by one of the trainees sending me the thing in the Unani medicine. So what is stopping others to write about the Ayurvedic principles in a big way? There are actually articles here and there, but not in the consolidated manner as one would like to see that. But in principle, when you're talking about research, these are all universal in nature. So coming to the subject of interest these days is about humanitarian emergency and disasters. So when we say natural disasters, it is periodic in nature, cyclones, earthquakes, forest fires, volcano eruption, etc., etc. Man-made disasters are terrorist activities mainly, and then environment change, which we are actually creating. Everybody has been saying that COVID-19 pandemic has been advantageous in a sense that now we have a clear environment because people are not going out that much. People have, not polluted the environment too much. So environmental change is also very, very important. And then we have the third category, outbreaks. So you have the flu-like infections, COVID-19, Ebola, Zika, Nipah, and so on. And now already there are rumblings heard that there's another pandemic going to happen, probably a mutation of COVID-19 or a new virus, we don't know. So what is the situation in such circumstances? It's incoherent mental status. People are shell-shocked, they are panicking or are under fear. There's breakdown of protective infrastructure and human resources for care and interventions. And then we also need to understand the Disaster Management Act 2005. I'll talk about it in subsequent slides, and about national advisories in such situation. So in order to understand where we stand today, we need to go back into the history. So the Constitution, Article 23 talks about maintenance of social security and social insurance. Article 29 says that prevention of the extension from one state to another of infectious or contagious diseases or pests affecting men, animals, or plants has to be attempted. So Disaster Management Act 2005, it is National Disaster Management Authority, where PM is the chairperson, and state, district, local management authorities are each powerful in their own sphere, national and state government advisories have to be followed, and these come from time to time. Then one must also remember that there was an Epidemic Diseases Act in 1897, as early as that, which has been invoked time and again, and the last one was March 11, 2020. Time that this act is changed. So state-specific act or ordinance, like we have Tamil Nadu Public Health Act 1939, Kerala Epidemic Diseases Ordinance 2020, and each state would have probably released some sort of policy statement having a legal aspect. And let me tell you that whatever the state advisories come, you cannot actually go against it because it has a legal position. So you can't violate that. Now the story of J. Chowdhury. What happened? So Orissa Homeopathic Act was passed in 1958, and J. Chowdhury was actually a homeopath practitioner in Puri town. So during Rath Jatra, you have that as an annual festivity, and to stop the spread of cholera, inoculation used to be given as a preventive measure. Now this homeopath, he said that my medicine will give me sufficient protection. I don't need to take this inoculation. And it went to court because he had violated the state uh, requirement. So Orissa State High Court order came in 1963, stating that this homeopath did not act as per regulations. So no exemption for alternate protection in the regulations was described. So homeopathy was not described there, so he has violated the act. So as per section 188 IPC, a token punishment was given to him, either pay ₹5 or be in jail for 1 week if he did not pay that. So this is only to highlight the fact that you cannot go against state imperatives, central imperatives first, and then the state, and then the local authorities, and so on. What is the status in India? So Ministry of Ayush had released advisory on Jan 29, 2020. Of course, this has been changed again, and the later addendum as immunomodulatory drugs. So initially it was prophylaxis, and the states, health being the state subject, different states actually gave different directives. Gujarat, Goa are all okay about use of traditional systems. Kerala directive was, as soon as this was known, it stopped. Actually, it made all the Indian systems of medicine hospitals stop. Discharge. They asked the hospitals to discharge all the patients, and also, if somebody was suspected to be having COVID, they were asked to direct them to the medical or health authorities, hospitals. So that means modern medicine. Then later they revised it. They said that, okay, you can open your clinics. But still, there is no opening for treatment by the traditional systems of medicine practitioners. Tamil Nadu, every patient is given Siddha medicine. Karnataka directive, if the patient, it's a patient preference there. If they want to take, and this is actually true for many other states which have been allowed to open COVID facilities in the Indian systems of medicine. And there, of course, it's the choice of the patient whether they want to get treated there or not. But generally speaking, what I have felt so far is that there's less resistance to the medications being prescribed by the Indian systems of medicine than the modern medicine or conventional medicine. So what is the need of the hour? We need to have administrative or political coordination between nation, state authorities, and stakeholders. And these decisions should be implemented. For this, the district administration, local self-government institutions should play a role. And there are actually something called constitutional codes where people can register PILs and close monitoring is required to see that there is compliance to the Disaster Management Act and protection of human rights. Nowadays, we hear a lot about this solidarity. What is the solidarity? It is a common actually language used in public health, principle of solidarity. So now we are actually seeing examples of that. That is internationally, it is between governments. The pandemic actually has opened doors. All the doors are open for free communication of information between governments, between people, between research institutions, etc. And the government support is there for bearing costs of interventions. Businesses are supposed to exercise their corporate social responsibility, and unfortunately we hear a number of instances where patients admitted in COVID facilities of private sector are charged too high for this. So for this, the government will have to take a stand. How to go about it? So individuals' responsibility, they have to be cooperative in day-to-day life. Like you have instances of people who are COVID positive, they're asked to go to the quarantine, they jump the quarantine premises. In fact, I was told by one of the migrant laborer who was sent to his village. So as soon as they reached there, they were placed in quarantine in a school. And he was telling me, because I had to actually, he had interacted with me because of his health position, and knowing Hindi was my advantage. And that was, of course, his anxiety to reach home. But he was telling me that here people are actually disappear in the night, come back in the morning, or they disappear during the morning, come back in the night. So what type of quarantine is that? Who is actually controlling that? Who is monitoring that? These are all important aspects. One has to cooperate in such instances. What are the ethical issues in practice for COVID affected people, for non-COVID affected people? So in COVID scenario, it is imperative that you take informed consent, whether it is for treatment or for research. And you have to see whether risk and benefits of treatment you have to weigh them carefully and impart that to the patients. The patient have to declare their voluntariness. So informed consent actually is a document showing whether they are entering in, or they're taking the treatment voluntarily or enrolling themselves in research voluntarily. And if there are any alternatives, that also has to be told to them. Let them make a choice. So what has affected actually patients? There is a psychological trauma because of the restriction. I already told you about the laborer telling me that people were jumping in the quarantine facilities, probably due to fear, or they wanted to go home very badly and things like that. In the bargain, they never thought that they were going to infect other people. So, and it is a general feeling of depression when you are all alone, not communicating with people. So lack of humane communication is there. They crave for sympathetic expression or physical presence. Even body language will do. With all that attire of PPE, what you call them, there's absolutely no expression on the face. Nobody can see your expression. And they are like robots also, mostly. So what are these people going to learn from that? But on the contrary, I have also heard of people, suppose they are living in blocks in one house, COVID positive person is there, they have been quarantined, the neighbors, and these are all, learned community area. And the neighbors are all so angry, why this person is kept here, why can't the person be taken to the hospital and things like that, objections about that. And they shun these people. They don't even talk to them, not even on the phone. And then when the health workers are coming there to check on them, they're so happy to see them, because at least there is some human being coming here asking how they are. So this is the position. And uncertain and experimental therapies are there. One doesn't know whether it will work or not. And for the health workers, there's lack of personal protective equipment. Most of the corporate sectors, they are not even providing these things properly. And prioritization of scarce resources has to be actually discussed by the management. And dignified death is a big problem, and disposable of the dead body. Of course, when it is COVID positive, all people who die, they have to be tested for whether they are COVID positive or not. Because depending on that, the disposal of the body will be decided. This is the picture of the doctor who was actually in the management group of the hospital, his hospital. He suffered from COVID-19 by looking after his patients. Unfortunately, he succumbed to the disease. And there was so much of reaction. This was in Tamil Nadu. His dead body was being taken in the ambulance, and people came and stopped the ambulance, broke the windows and all that, and asked that the body be kept brought out of the ambulance. And the family is actually traveling behind, and it was lying on the road. How can people be so cruel? The fear of death can turn you into animals. And later, of course, his colleague was crying and telling that he dug the grave for this man in the corporation crematorium. And later the family pleaded that this body be taken to their church's premises for proper, burying rituals. And the other picture that you see is from one of the Mumbai hospitals, where the dead bodies as well as the patients were lying side by side. Side by side means next cot. So this was a scenario earlier. Of course, things have improved now. And if you were to suffer from non-COVID illnesses, people were afraid to approach clinical facilities thinking that they will actually become COVID positive. Or if, especially if the hospitals were to convert into COVID facilities, even if they had another area trying to treat these people, they will not approach that hospital. And on the other hand, people who wanted help, for example, reproductive and child health, chronic diseases, they wanted help with the medications, etc. Dialysis patients. I was told one of my relatives was to actually undergo dialysis. And he said that the beds were overflowing with patients. And most of them were MLAs and the local corporates or somebody. So where will they get the bed for that? And cancer patients, they also suffered. Mental health issues, all these non-COVID illnesses, actually patients suffering from that suffered because of either denial of care or non-availability of medications, because we had lockdown, etc., etc. Denial of immunization, the routine, that was not properly done, and then, of course, interrupted the supplies, affecting timely treatment. Now, what are the specific issues in COVID-19 research? So if you actually look at this, industry-sponsored trials have been in mostly in North America, and half of that almost is in the Asian area. You can see that very well. And they found that 43 US industry-sponsored trials, 72% were delayed or getting initiated, and the average delay was 1.8 months. So initial stages, you can imagine what chaos was happening, and mostly the industry suffered, and in many ways, because I can't actually explain all that because time will run out. So in India, the requirements, the two requirements are registration in the Clinical Trial Registry of India and review only by those ECs which are registered. When we saw some proposals from Ayush, we asked, are these ECs registered? Then we got to know that some of them were not registered. So people are taking it very lightly. It is part and parcel of new drugs and clinical trial rules, which was released in 2019, March 19. And people are so lackadaisical in trying to get their ECs registered. I request that all those people who are attending this, if their EC is not yet registered, please go ahead and get it registered, because it's a law now. Because of COVID circumstances, the strict implementation has not been taken care of by the Department of Health Research, where all your ECs will have to get registered because you're not doing regulatory clinical trials, which come under the purview of the drug controller. So please go ahead with that process at least now. So the constraint of emergency situation was time, choice of intervention, research, what research methodology to use. There was very inadequate information. In fact, there was a lot of misinformation propagated by the media also, and inadequate resources, human, infrastructure, financial. Human in the sense that some didn't turn up due to fear, and those who turned up fell victim to the disease itself. And so the human resources became less in number, awaiting publication of results, whether we are right or not to decide that. All these were the constraints. So there is a difficult choice of design. The main aim should be how many can be saved or how many deaths may occur. So it is always better to have as little outcome measures as possible for a proper statistical evaluation for efficacy. We have seen proposals which have got 4 or 5 outcome measures. When you have that, it becomes very complicated actually to decide whether it was found effective or not. Word about recovery trial, what this recovery trial is, I'll just say that recovery trial has been actually initiated in UK. And this trial has only one outcome to measure actually. So it is not that you have to have so many outcome measures to judge whether your treatment is good or not. The prerequisites of research. Of course, research always should have a social value. It has to have scientific validity. So you have to do things in a hurry. That does not mean that you have to throw the scientific aspects to the wind. There has to be quick ethics review. An ethics committee meets once in 2 months, 3 months, 1 month. Now they cannot actually, when COVID research comes, they cannot stick to facilities should be there actually, because most of the time you may have to do online meeting. So the institution should be responsible for providing that facility. And good participatory practice. What is good participatory practice? It's actually the designers of the study, the investigator, the institution, the sponsor on one side, and the community, the participant on the other side. They should come together and design the study. That is the best method to follow. But of course, I can understand that in such situations of emergency, that may not be possible unless the institution is a big one and it can afford to do all these things. Wherever possible, they should do it. So ICMR guidelines 2017, in the 7th section, it says, follow all relevant guidelines and regulations if other systems used include co-investigators from those systems. So this is what I was actually highlighting earlier. When you talk about integrated approach, you should be together as investigators. Ethics committee should co-opt experts from relevant system for review. That is very often a problem when modern medicine institutions ethics committee is approached for approving the traditional system proposal from an institution which doesn't have its own ethics committee. So, or the researcher from that institution may submit such a proposal. In that case, they should choose a good expert to give them the opinion and the guidance regarding the proposal. If folklore ethnomedicine is patentable, then you need to actually consider benefit sharing. That is, how much of that, mostly when it gets patented, there's the commercial end to that. In that case, how much percent will go back to the patient, how much percent will go to the institution, all that has to be charted out earlier itself. And of course, the product should have quality. What are the barriers in research? It's actually resource allocation. How much of resources can go for that? And if you look, actually the resources go more for the COVID research rather than any other type of research. And you have to actually see duplication, whether duplication can be avoided, and confronting desperation and fear of participants when you are actually enrolling them. That is actually a great barrier. Ethics committees, they have a lot of work to do about weighing the benefit and risk of that particular proposal, whether they can actually approve that on those grounds or not. And what is the method of obtaining informed consent? I've seen that many Ayush projects were actually very, faithfully trying to take the written informed consent. But this is a circumstance where you can waive off informed consent in certain circumstances, or you can actually take alternative ways of obtaining informed consent, like oral informed consent. And now you have these platforms, electronic platforms. So you can even, almost everybody has mobile. So the person can actually send you his approval or his consent through the mobile, and then you actually relate it to another laptop or tablet or laptop, where you can see whether the patient has consented or not. So you need to actually build a trust. Whether that trust is built or not is also important for ethics committee also to dwell on that. So the language can be a barrier for the participants. Example, like I had said earlier, that we have lots of migrant laborers. I think they have spread all over India. So in such cases, how do you actually approach them? You may not be able to, you'll have to actually take recourse of people who know the language, and then access to intervention. Who will provide those medicines? That's also is very, very important. One needs to think of flexibilities. So reporting timelines. You have to actually see whether the supply mechanism is okay or not. Sometimes it may be delayed, so your reporting also may be delayed. And you should also see whether there's safety in lab collection procedures, because people who are taking the samples are also exposed in way or the other to the virus. So how you collect the data? Now people are talking more and more about remote monitoring. Instead of going on in person through the machine, they try to actually monitor. And data management systems are there which can actually pick up the sites which are not behaving properly. They can actually pick up that, and then somebody can go and see what's happening there and how you handle the data. So who sends you the data? The patient sends the data, or the healthcare workers who are there, because the researcher cannot enter the prohibited areas. So who sends you that, and how sincerely they send it? That's all important. For the monitor, it's a big, big job. How they get the source data review, how they do that, and source data validation. So all these actually involve softwares which will actually guide them, give them signals what is wrong somewhere. So, oh my God, this has become so reduced. Okay, this was supposed to be for Ayurveda. So you can actually use modern scientific tools. Not somebody's property or something like that. All the traditional systems can use this, and we have heard so many talks in the previous days who have actually highlighted the importance of using scientific tools for research. Who is stopping you from that? And interdisciplinary collaboration, strive for universal acceptance and satisfaction of end users, and control studies better. Always we say RCTs are not possible in Indian systems of medicine. It may be possible in certain areas, it may not be possible in certain other areas. But again, I'm coming back to the word called platform trials. Perhaps I'll describe this later. What is platform trials? And this is a methodology which is becoming more and more important in the COVID times. Why so? I'll tell you later. So, what are the pillars of protection in Ayurvedic practice? When you say you have your sloka also, which says that the physician, medicine, patient, and attendant, all four of them contribute to the success of a particular use of medication. And if you translate this into public health area, the physician becomes the caregiver, medicine becomes the supplies, patient is patient, and attendant, it is a facility. So let us take this one by one. Caregiver. So how the caregiver actually recruits, that is important. The safety of the patient is important. Follow up, how will you follow up? Protocol deviations, lots of protocol deviations will be there because, lockdown, no transport, and safety issues. People will not allow the researcher to go there. In fact, I was told in one of the homeopathy trials that is happening, they had to go to the containment area. So I asked, how are you taking informed consent? They said, we are taking written informed consent. So I was a little disturbed because written informed consent means, again, there's a chance of contamination there. Okay, fine. How are you taking that? We ask the other members of the family, one by one they come, we go with the protection of the police personnel. One by one they come out and they give their consent and we talk to them. Any problems, any inhibitions or any fear? Nothing like that. They are actually welcoming us. So that was actually something that I thought I'll have to take with a pinch of salt unless I go for monitoring. But then subsequently I came across many people told me that there's less resistance when it comes to the treatment medications given by the Indian systems of medicine. So protocol deviations means you have asked the person to come this week. That person hasn't come because there was a lockdown, no transport, nothing of that sort. That person could not come. So that means there's a protocol deviation. But this is actually understandable protocol deviation. You have to report it anyway. You can't say that, oh, it was not possible, so this is not protocol deviation. You can't do that. It is expected that there will be number of protocol deviations. In ordinary circumstances, number of protocol deviations means there is something wrong with the researcher. So that is actually a warning sign for monitoring. But in present circumstances, this will be accepted. Same thing about the adverse event and serious adverse event care. Field surveys, that's where you must have heard in several channels, they had shown how people were throwing stones from the terrace to the survey personnel who had come and people getting hurt because of that. So initially, of course, now we don't hear much of this. So people have got used to it, I suppose. And there's something called fatigue also, so even fear, panic, your research, everything has a fatigue angle there. And then, of course, when you are going to do socio-behavioral research, it's actually coming into closer contact with people. So you have to be more careful about your own protection. So sometimes supplies are affected, as I told you, because of the lack of transport, etc. So you may have to give extra medication. For example, you have asked the person to come every week and collect medication. Instead of that, suppose your follow-up period is, say, 1 month, you will have to give 1 month supply. But at the end of that 1 month, the person is supposed to come to you for follow-up. That person may not turn up because everything has become all right. Why should I go? So what happens to your research then? And then delivery arrangements you may have to make. I know of people who have a management groups who have taken a lot of trouble in getting the deliveries delivered to, and the medical supplies delivered to the patients. Or if you can reduce the dosage, whatever supply they have, can advise them to reduce it, provided it doesn't have a lesser effect or it's going to be detrimental for them. So maintenance of requirements are important. So what about patient follow-up? So one thing is patient is, as I told you earlier also, that they fear to approach the hospital. And sometimes even if they come for their routine checkup or something like that, the premises may be prohibited. Or it is a chest X-ray to be taken, but what to do? The X-ray division is locked because there are no people there. So these are expected problems. And then geographical restrictions. Of course, now you don't have state-to-state restrictions, but earlier, suppose the JIPMER patients had to come from, say, Tamil Nadu. So the JIPMER area was, the Pondicherry area was closed to people coming from other states. So what do you do in such instances? Alternatives. Can you advise the patient to take any alternatives in the interim period? That's a big decision to take. And then, of course, if there are testings to be done, blood tests, etc., to be done, and the patient cannot come to you, you can ask the patient to get it done at a local facility. But then you also know that standardization is very important. So you never know what is that local facility, how good it is, you don't know. So you'll have to take those findings with a pinch of salt. Institutional facility, of course, management is very, very important. Safety provisions should be provided, reasonable cost, and as I told you, in corporate sector, it is a different scenario altogether. And then testing facility, whether that institution has got ICMR approval for testing for the COVID, all these are important. And also supply of adequate PPE. In fact, IMA in Kerala had actually offered to supply PPE and gloves and things like that to smaller hospitals, who did not have the resources because patients were not coming. They did not have the financial resources. So they were actually supplying this. And I was told by some of these people that it was a big, big help for them at that time. So what are the directives for the ethics committees? Now, I told you about 2006 guidelines. It had a small section in the ethics review procedures on disaster management. And section 12, you have the 12th section, 2017 guidelines, you have the 12th section dealing with the whole scenario. And taking, based on that, with certain other requirements, the National Guidelines for Ethics Committee in COVID Research was released in 2020. Now, what does this actually denote? There's actually a statement of general principles, which is the same as given in the ICMR guidelines. General ethical issues with some modifications, ethical review procedures, informed consent, vulnerability. This is the statement of general principles. If you recall my earlier Indian philosophy slide where I said Sadhana Dharma, so this all belongs to the Sadhana Dharma of research. That is the principle of essentiality. It has to have a scientific basis. Voluntariness, non-exploitation is self-explanatory. When we say social responsibility, the greenish blue one that you see actually are the three principles which have replaced the older ones. So social responsibility means you have to actually see that your research doesn't cause any rift, any ethnic violation there. I'll talk about that in my subsequent slide. And privacy and confidentiality is also important. Risk minimization, as far as possible, minimize that risk, Professional competence, of course, this has the basis from the ICA GCP, Indian GCP, whatever, from GCP. Maximization of benefit as far as possible, try to increase it as much as possible. Institutional arrangements means the institution has got a role to play in seeing that such research is conducted. Transparency and accountability is self-explanatory. Totality of responsibility is something goes wrong. It is not only the researcher, but also the ethics committee, the institution, and if there's a sponsor, all these people in the chain are responsible for that. And when it comes to environmental protection, I already told you that even the newer biology, what you say, the synthetic biology, nanotechnology, etc., where you can find these fumes actually contaminating the environment. What safety measures can you take there? And we all talk about the researchers. We don't talk about the people, the attenders, etc., the collateral people who are employed there. What about their safety? One has to take care of that. So when we talk of general ethical issues, benefit risk assessment, privacy, distributive justice, payment for participation, compensation, conflict of interest, community engagement, post-research access and benefit sharing, these are all the same as in the general, ICMR guidelines. What has been added here is storage of biological material, which actually in the general, in the ICMR guidelines is a separate section by itself. But this is a time when you are actually taking biological material. You might probably do the testing and then destroy it. But maybe in future, if you have a molecular biology wing, which is very strong with all the high grade technology being used there, you would like to keep that material for subsequent research later. So how do you go about it? So that is described here. And collaboration in research, public health and socio-behavioral research, role of agencies, sponsors, and governance of research, which is very, very important these days, and biosafety in laboratories and hospitals. This is very, very important. So how does the ethics review procedure take place? It can actually divide its objective into, we will see COVID research now. We will not see any new non-COVID research. They can say that. Then there was an argument that why not non-COVID research also? Why should it wait? So there was a lot of debate about it. Finally, they decided, okay, we can take it, provided is it of great urgency that you have to approve that? And if you are approving, are you going to implement it immediately? So they may argue, no, we'll keep it like that. Once the situation relaxes, then we will go ahead with that. And then ongoing, what happens to the ongoing non-COVID research? We'll talk about it later. So COVID research. So whatever research it is, their scientific and ethical value cannot be undermined. So they have to be compliant with the national guidelines and regulations. EC registration with appropriate agencies should be there. Registration of COVID-19 related research in CTRI, these two factors I had already described earlier. And then you categorize, the member secretary's job is to categorize the proposals into exempt variety, expedited, full committee review. Mostly it will go to expedited review, but expedited review means you have only a small number, 4 or 5 members maximum. Full committee means all the members, provided the quorum is satisfied. So the full committee can actually meet in an expeditious manner because this is an emergency. So we may call it unscheduled meeting. You have once in a month, now you have to see every week, then it will be unscheduled meeting. So review on a case-to-case basis depends on the urgency. And quorum has to be maintained come what may. So that cannot be compromised. So you can have tele or web conferences. Sometimes what happens is you may have to collect the data or the sample because time is running out. And at the same time, you have submitted your proposal and the review is taking place, taking time. So today, if you have submitted and you have to collect the samples urgently or the data urgently, you start collecting it. And 24 hours later, 48 hours later, 72 hours later, the EC will decide whichever way it is. So it approves it means you keep all that data or sample with you. It doesn't approve it, then you may have to destroy it. But you will have to actually thrash out a policy how to deal in such situations. But this flexibility is provided. So available protocol review is expedited with interim or re-review if emergency situation changes. Interim reports, generally you ask for once in a year report, or if the risk is more, third monthly, 6 monthly, like that. But today is a situation where you can't wait that long. So you may say after every third case, report to us. But suppose you have a sample size of, say, prophylactic study of Guduchi or Ashwagandha, whatever. You are doing a prophylactic study in a population. You have 30,000, 40,000 people as sample size. Then you cannot be reporting like that, So you do that, you will get it in thousands, you will get. And after every 1,000, you can decide after every 1,000 you report. Generally, they say that at least, for safety criteria, you may have to cover maybe 25%, and for the efficacy, 50%. So that is what our DSMB had decided about how to treat the interim data. So if members of local ethics committee are not available, then any other ethics committee in India could review till local ethics committee is able to convene. So timely review, re-review if required. Multiple ethics committees can be there in an institution, and by mutual agreement, services of another institution may be used, which I already told you earlier. The role of independent ethics committees, initially independent ethics committees were allowed only one type of trial by the regulator. Now, independent ethics committees, when I say that, it means commercial ethics committees. So they could actually review the non-regulatory research. So you can actually approach, if a clinician wants to do some research, then that clinician has no ethics committee or anything like that. So they can approach the independent ethics committee. Only thing is, independent ethics committee should also monitor what is happening. One-time approval is not enough. You can have subcommittees for SAE or expedited review committee. That's up to you to decide. Then there is something called ICMR common forms. I would advise you to go to the ICMR website for these ICMR common forms. Everybody can adopt that. It almost covers all points. If there's any extra point to be added, you can always add that. So if you submit in that form, it will be more or less uniform. Because we saw these Ayush projects, 26 of them. Every project was in a different shape. Some have beautiful first half, some had the latter part in bad shape. All sorts of shapes, we saw that. If you can have a regular format, that would be easier. In fact, I think Ayush can prepare a common template which you people can adopt. So SOP for emergency research review is also already there in the guidelines, and you can adopt that for your SOP, because every ethics committee has to have SOPs. So this is an extra SOP which has to be added for such events. Screening by secretariat for completeness and categorization is important. Many a times in the hurry, people are submitting proposals which do not have enough information, and they're not complete in content also. There's some part of it may be actually disappearing or will not be submitted. You have a questionnaire won't be there. Informed consent, if it is say children, The parental consent only will be there. There will not no assent form and all that. You can't afford to have such incomplete proposals being submitted, and it's the duty of the secretariat to see that everything is in order. Of course, ethics committee has to meet in an accelerated manner and also decide issues in an accelerated manner. So, of course, virtual or tele-video meeting is preferable. It's suitable virtual platform. I don't know how many platforms I have actually encountered by this time. Must be 6, 7 types. Every time, sometimes there is a problem. So agenda should be short. You should not have 10 or 20 proposals all at once. You can take 2 or 3 at a time, because going through the proposal itself in minute way takes time. Prior review by experts and clarifications from researchers, if that is done, half your time is saved actually. So special invitees may be called, and when they give their opinion and all that, after that they can leave the web meeting. If there's a physical meeting, you can always ask them to leave the room. But in a virtual meeting, you will have to ask them to leave the meeting, web meeting, because that sign should come that so and so has left the meeting. So this is important during decision making. So, and the review consenting method, how you communicate to participant, change PI due to PI may become indisposed, then you have to use the co-I as the person in charge, privacy and confidentiality protection, protection from stigma, discrimination, and the decision is taken by consensus or voting. If there is any disagreement, that reason should be recorded. With permission of the members, you can always digitally record it. And that actually also gives you the documentation about who and all were present during the meeting. The attendance is marked that way. In normal times, you in physical presence, you sign the paper, but now here that is not possible. So it's a virtual signature. Multicentric research, you can have multi-sites. We have had this Ayush projects in 3 or 4 centers doing the same thing. So you can have a common review by a designated ethics committee. And if there is any input to be given by the site, the other sites, they can give that and finally finalize that protocol. That will become the master protocol. But the implementation will be taken care of each site ethics committee, monitoring, everything included. So local registered ethics committee is free to accept decision, whether they abide by that or not, or they can actually review their own in their own way, in an expeditious manner. It will always be better if everybody agrees to the common protocol. But there could be site-specific issues. So if everybody is agreeable to that, they can actually deviate in that particular instance. But it all depends upon the sponsor, whether they actually agree to that or not. Common review is generally for low or minimal risk, but in emergency situation like this, where high risk is there or vulnerable population is actually being researched upon, then you can adopt this method. So continuing, once you have given approval, it is not enough. You have to continually review that, monitor whether they are actually complying with the protocol or the guidelines or the regulations, how many protocol deviations or violations are there. Depending on that, they can halt the study if violations are there. At the same time, sometimes, if you see, and this is where the DSMB becomes important. If the DSMB feels that this research is futile now, we are not going to gain anything more than this finding, so then they can actually ask that the study be stopped. And this recommendation has to come to the ethics committee, and then only the ethics committee can take a decision on that. So the compensation is determined by the ethics committee in case of research-related injury. What about ongoing non-COVID research? Here, recruitment can be stopped It all depends on case-to-case basis. Where it is not possible to take a fresh case, then it can be stopped for the time being. And then naturally you will have to extend the duration of the study because of the delay due to recruitment. Progress, you can actually get the progress report by phone, or you can, instead of 3 visits on weekly basis, you can reduce that number of visits, or you can even halt the visit if it is of a minor nature that you are asking them to come for. But if you have to draw blood, etc., then naturally the person has to come to your facility. Sometimes what happens is you can actually ask the patient to come to another place where they feel more comfortable instead of coming to the hospital. So these are things you may have to, as a researcher, you may have to actually arrange for. So if some sites are not yet initiated, you can actually postpone the initiation of those sites. In some instances, you may have to have reconsenting. So now, new non-COVID research, what happens there? This is where I was saying that if the study is important, besides COVID-19 research, then it may be reviewed and see if in negative impact on participants are there, or if increased risk to participants are there. If so, are there any safeguards? This is what you have to see in the new non-COVID research. When it comes to informed consent, how you communicate, how the person understands, does the patient have any ability to reason it out? If not, somebody else enters the picture. So documentation of informed consent is very important, because the participant, when we say participants, the patient is actually an equal partner with you. That is why we call them participants and not subjects. And that should be voluntary. So there are actually so many elements of informed consent document in the ICMR guidelines on page 50. I will not elaborate on that. You can refer to that when you actually are preparing an informed consent document. So for children and illiterate, you have the legally authorized or acceptable representative. If the participant is illiterate, you have to have an impartial witness. Research on samples, you have to, you can either take broad consent saying that you have to give them an option actually, whether they would like to have their samples preserved for future research. Generally the language is for future scientific purposes. In that case, you can preserve the samples. Or if the patient says, I do not want to have that done, I want to give my sample, then also you have to actually give them the privilege. There are electronic consent. I already told you earlier how in mobile also or in tablets, you can actually have the consent taken through that media. And certain circumstances, you can have waiver of consent and oral consent. Oral consent, when you do that, somebody has to document that. So the impartial witness will become important even in this instance. As I told you, that people did not want to talk to the COVID positive people, did not want to go anywhere near them, no help. Do you want food? No, nothing of that offer. So risk to frontline workers is the other one. Racism, discrimination. Now, here is where a new word has come up in bioethics parlance. That is black bioethics. Black bioethics, there's no white bioethics or black bioethics. The black bioethics actually means when you have Africans, African Americans, or people of African origin included in the study. Either they are not included, or if they are included, for what purpose? So they have said that time and again we have been actually discriminated. There's a lot of racism, and that voice is actually rising even more now. Everybody would have heard about that instance of Floyd being killed by those policemen, and that actually has led to a lot of flaring up. And now they are talking about this black bioethics. So, enrolling them or seeing to their welfare. Very often there's a therapeutic misconception which has to be, the first sentence in the ICMR, page 50 that I told you, the the elements of informed consent document. The first statement is that this is research. So you have to make it very, very clear to them that this is research and not any therapy as such, which may benefit them, which may not benefit them. Very often I've seen in the informed consent document, the Indian systems stating that uh, you have no risk in taking this medicine because it is a time proven medicine. That should not be the statement. You may say that no risk is expected, but if it happens, we will take care of it. And in the benefit, it is written this medication is always beneficial. You can't say that. You have to say you may or may not benefit, because who knows, the person may not respond to it, and then the person will say, you said that I will benefit from this, I have got no benefit, I have not benefited from them. So you don't want to be exposed to such a situation. Additional safeguards have to be there for risk mitigation. Safety of healthcare workers, of course, you have to provide them PPE and other facilities. Safety, the hours of work that they have to do, 6 to 8 hours in that dress, they're suffocated. And you should not keep on, using them for long hours of duty. Give them some rest. So that should be there. I mean, there should be batches of people coming in and going. Safety from disturbing instances and assault. You know very well, there was a lot of instances of violence in the recent past, but now we don't seem to hear much of that. But that resentment may still be there. Prioritize research and schedules to prevent overcrowding, and insurance cover should be there. The psychological needs, I already told you, these people are away from the family, they break down actually. There was actually in some of these channels how they showed that these people were away from home for 3 weeks, 3 months, and when they came back to the family, how happy the family was. And some people who had children, the husbands were bringing the nurses, the husbands were bringing the children, and from far only they could see the mom, and they used to start crying for getting to the mom, and mom cannot go anywhere near the child. All these scenarios actually need some psychological support to the people who are actually contributing to the care of the affected. No stigmatization should be there. I mean, you have heard about doctors and nurses being shunned because they are working in the COVID wards. So the complaint was that if you don't look at the patients, they say you are very cruel and all that. Why are you doctor? Why are you nurse? And if you look at them, they say shun the doctor. So what do we do? That's their answer. So there has to be a good communication to and fro traffic. A word always is very comforting, and flexible working hours. The protected privacy, when you talk of privacy in public health issues, the personal privacy sometimes become very restricted because you need to tell a patient about one patient to the family so that they take necessary precautions. And for the patient himself or herself also, you have to tell them about it. To public health authority and its collaborating foreign agencies, sometimes the foreign collaborators may also need to know the data and all those things. So you have to inform that there will be just restricted information given to them. Sometimes you may have to inform the patient's family or others involved with a patient's care and healthcare providers to share if public health safety is threatened. Technologies, lots of technologies have come into play. Novel research methodologies. I don't know how many of you would have actually heard of umbrella trials, basket trials, and platform trials. This is what I was telling you. The platform trials are ones which are now catching the eye. UK has done the recovery trial, which is I wouldn't say has done, is doing recovery trial, and from time to time interim reports are actually published in the NEJM. And the thing is, they have only one outcome there. And the how the platform trial is done is you have one control arm and you have several other arms trying different uh, treatment modalities. In your case, it would be say one arm will be Guruchi, one arm will be Ashwagandha, one arm something else, and but there'll be only one control arm. So in that case, you are not actually exhausting other people as control arm. Like I know of 4 centers at least. In each center, there's a control arm and there's one formulation. So you can have this done in one particular area. And when you are doing that, in the same time frame, you will get to understand which is better. Is Guduchi better or is Ashwagandha better? You will get to know that. For example, now this recovery trial has found that HCQ is of no benefit in severe cases. So they removed that arm. Then they found that, what is it, Tiponavir or something like that. That also is not working that well. So they have remdesivir as another arm. So you can actually, when you're moving forward, you get to understand this is not working. So you don't have to proceed further. You can just stop it. And then you will naturally come across the best medicine that was in the whole trial modality. So that is what is platform trial. Umbrella trial and basket trial actually are concerned the genetic, same genetic markers. So this is more as a molecular level type of trial. Telemedicine is another way of dealing with the patients, getting their progress report, and also them actually asking you questions and things like that. Alternate location of follow-up is what I had already told you about. You can reduce site visits, you can have remote monitoring to get the electronic medical record, AE or SAE reports, and you can provide alternative drugs. If there is and lots of, you can actually expect a lot of missing data and inadequate sample size. You actually went for 400, but you have been able to recruit only 238. What do you do about that? So here, that's why the data management statisticians are also important in actually finding a solution to get a meaningful outcome out of such research. These days, a lot is being talked about controlled human infection models. So it was tried earlier in malaria, cholera, typhoid. The difference from phase 1 is that you introduce infectious agents. Now you don't infect them with virulent varieties. You actually attenuate them or reduce their virulence, and then you introduce that. So you are actually introducing infection. You're not using, like in phase 1, you have the new intervention, new drug, etc., vaccine. But here it is infection. So there's always a fear of it actually infecting other people. Uh, in case of malaria, mosquito biting, that person can actually relate it to somebody else. That fear is there. But there will be very controlled surroundings there. And then nowadays, a lot is being talked about COVID-19. There's a lot of debate. People who have bioethicists who have suffered from COVID-19 say, I have suffered from COVID-19. It's a horrible experience. I will never ask that people be subjected to the same. There are people who are saying that, why not? We can do that. We can have very controlled, surroundings and things like that. But unlike the case of malaria, cholera, typhoid, you have alternate treatment methods. Now for COVID-19, no standard of care has been declared so far. So what are you going to actually try in them? So let's also understand that this is not a new concept. Long time back in 1900, Major Walter Reed actually had experimented with yellow fever in Cuba. This is the informed consent document that you see here. And here actually it is written that, this was, most of them were Mexicans. So there was a Spanish translation also. So first time you hear about a local language translation. So here the people were supposed to, suppose they were coming in the camp, uh, they will be free to decide what they want. Suppose they agree to take part in the experiment, then they could not leave the camp. And then if they were enrolling, they were asked to, they were offered $100 American gold. And if they suffered from yellow fever, they were offered another $100 in American gold. The problem was that if they died, there was no nominee. So compare that to the present situation. This would be actually no withdrawal, because once they enroll, they cannot withdraw. That was one point. Second point was undue inducement. Third point was if they die, who gets the money? So now we have, in India, we have nominee and things like that. So this concept was there long time back, in an attempt to actually learn how this goes and infects, how we can tackle it. But those days were days when nobody used to question people. But today, there are many who will question such methodology. So probably COVID-19 research may provide valuable inputs for ethical guidance for future research in outbreaks. Just as we learned from Ebola, a lot of things, and in WHO guidance came out in 2016 as to what steps should be taken in such instances. Probably COVID-19 will bring out a better guidance in future. With that, I thank you all for patient listening.
Thank you, madam. Such a elaborative, extensive oration on biomedical ethics and pertaining to the COVID-19 research. We have many questions are there. With the time constraint, I'll take only a few questions. The first one is from Dr. Deepak Dua. To which authority should Ayurveda Ethics Committee register?
DHR.
DHR. The second question is from Dr. Shashireka Spurti. What are the ethical issues related to the use of traditional medicine on COVID patient?
Can you repeat that?
Yes, madam. What are the ethical issues related to the use of traditional medicine on COVID patients?
See, the ethics will come only after the regulations in this case. As I told you, under the Act, you have to go by the national advisory, state advisory. So what is prevalent in each state, you have to follow that. Ethically, you may be actually pained that you could have given this to the patient. But unfortunately, we are regulated. You have to follow the advisory that if the state allows you to give, then you can do that. But okay. Otherwise, now, for example, in Karnataka, I understand that you can treat these patients. So that would be ethical, provided you are taking informed consent from them.
Another question from Mr. Pritham Pai. What precautions should be taken while enrolling pediatric patients for research projects in this pandemic situation?
Pediatric people, pediatric children, when you are enrolling them, you have to take consent of depending on the age, 0 to 7, only parental or LAR consent. In all cases, you have to take LAR or parental consent. 0 to 7, no assent. 7 to 12, oral assent. 12 to 18, written assent.
Okay, there is no any special ethical guidelines when it comes to the pediatric enrollments.
It is general only. You have actually another guideline, ICMR guideline involving children. So this is actually highlighted there.
Thank you very much, madam, for my elaborative lecture.
All researchers.
Okay, madam. Thank you once again. Now I'll request our honorable principal, sir, to cover the concluding remarks.
we had no, very elaborative and very pinpointed also informations with both speakers. Our keynote speaker, Professor B. Yashovarma, he touched right from the history and the motivated all of us to get into the research. In fact, Rajiv Gandhi University probably is one of the university which is motivating even undergraduates for research with a nominal research fund, and it's also now called for research for the research internship for postgraduates with the help of Association of Indian University. Also, there are no call for interdisciplinary research for the faculty of Rajiv Gandhi University, once again with the collaboration with the Association of Indian University. In fact, Rajiv Gandhi University is supporting for the research, though it is an educational university. It is supporting a lot for research. Thank you very much on behalf of the organization, especially Rajiv Gandhi University, to Dr. B. Yashovarma. You have set research organization at Dharwad, and also SDM Center for Research in Ayurveda and Allied Sciences at Udupi, and supporting even the faculties to undertake research. And in fact, SDM in all its institutions, it has included the research component and its outcome in performance-based appraisal of the employees. So it shows the support of management in SDM institutions for research. Once again, on behalf of Rajiv Gandhi University and SDM College of Ayurveda, Hassan, we wholeheartedly thank Dr. B. Yashovarma. Dr. Nandini, Dr. Nandini Kumar, you have touched each area of ethics, and it helped rather many of the institutions who are running research, and we have around 25 medical Ayurveda medical institutions wherein the post-graduation is offered, and where the research wing is established, and each post-graduation center recognized by the Government of India, they need to have a central research laboratory as the basic requirement. And ethical committee. One of the issues here is when the request for registering ethical committee from Ayurveda institution, health this a secretariat is not offering that service, and they direct it for Ministry of Ayush, and Ministry of Ayush has given some directions for the institution, which need also to be followed. Very basic things, including Bishak, Dravya, Upastata, Rogi, all these four component, maybe the service or care providers and patients. This has been touched, elaborately, and I'm sure every one of the participants today, we had great members listening to Dr. Nandini Kumar. Around 500 is already full in the Zoom, and is connected to the Facebook as well as YouTube. So every one of you also can follow it in the YouTube in the future days also. And these informations are made available in future days in the website of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences. Madam, you have touched the hearts as well as brain of each one of us. So on behalf of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, we wholeheartedly thank for your time, knowledge, and support for Indian system of medicine. We require your guidance for future endeavor in the research in Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences as well as SDM institutions. We have four Ayush colleges. We call it as BHU, that is Bangalore, Hassan, Udupi, and Ujire. So we need your support in the development of research in all these institutions. Once again, I thank on behalf of the organizers. And tomorrow, right at 2:50, we will be starting the session. And Dr. B. Ramakrishna, Honorable Vice Chancellor of S. Vyasa University, will be speaking to us as a keynote. And Dr. Girish Tillu from Pune, he will be a great, well-known researcher, will be talking on project publications. And immediate after that, exactly at 4 o'clock, we will be addressed and more information from regarding COVID treatment protocols or even preventary aspects will be dealt by our honorable, rather is a valedictory address by our Honorable Padma Shri Vaidya Rajesh Kutecha, Honorable Secretary of Ministry of Ayush. And session will be chaired by our Honorable Vice Chancellor of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, S. Sachidananda, and a divine blessing and foresightedness in the research will be given to us by Padma Vibhushan Dr. D. Virendra Hegde, the Chancellor of SDM University, Dharwad, and Dr. Kapase, who is the Registrar of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, will be guest of honor. I request all of you to join with us, and there will be a lot of information by our Honorable Secretary of Ayush, all the steps which is taken by the ministry and support which is given to this care of COVID-19. So I appreciate all the secretaries of this organizing committee of Samshodhana, right from Dr. Suhas Shetty, Dr. Girish, Dr. Nataraj, Dr. Sushant, Dr. Harini, and Mr. Moose, Dr. Moose. And please join us at 2:50 tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I also thank everyone.
Okay, we thank everyone there. And there is a small announcement for the delegates. Kindly expect a official mail, registered email ID by today or tomorrow regarding the e-certificate as well as the feedback. And we shall join tomorrow by sharp 2:50 for the valedictory session and as well as the final scientific session. Thank you, one and all.
One more information that morning 11 o'clock we have one more webinar is organized on pediatrics, Ayurveda pediatrics, mainly on ADHD and autism. Dr. Ragamala, Professor of Ayurveda pediatrics from Sri Venkateshwara University, Tirupati, will be talking on autism, and Dr. Divya Shri is the professor from Sri Sri Ayurveda Medical College, Bangalore. She will be talking on ADHD, autism and ADHD. So you please join this session also, which is starting from 11 o'clock in the morning.